I'm going to start just with a quote. It's one of my favorite quotes here, and this is really this says the defining wealth is wealth is the ability to fully experience life. And I leave that with you for a second. Wealth is the ability to fully experience life. And that's from Henry David Thoreau. Now, the reason I put this here is we are talking about funding, but really there's a number of questions we need to ask ourselves when we look at the funding. And the first one is, why are we setting up the business? We want to ask someone, a group of people, collectives, or maybe take money from our own savings to build something that's going to bring more wealth to ourselves, to our community, to the people that we're going to employ, and so forth. And so for me, this really defines part of my thinking, because to fully experience life means to have options to do things that you don't really have to be concerned about whether you can afford it or not. That's really the ultimate expression is, if you want to do something and your expectations may be less, it may be more than mine. It could be a Ferrari, it could be a house in the city. All right, so your life and the way you experience it is your own, but you need to look at it from the point of view of what is the ability that you have to experience that life. And obviously wealth comes in different formats. We are talking, focusing mainly on money here, but it's just something I thought I'd start with there. Now, when you look at funding, you're most likely going to be asking people to fund your venture, whether that's a bank, whether it's family and friends, or even whether it's just your partner that you share a home with. It doesn't really matter, but you need to convince them that what you're offering is worth their investment. And again, we're talking funding, but remember, funding is a means of resource. So as we talk about this and the business support, think a lot about the resource that's available as well. So people may not necessarily have money to help fund you, but if you have someone who can do a logo for you, if you had to pay for that, that's 350 Rand, maybe going up to 1,000, depending on who you're working with and what sort of package you're taking. But if you can get someone to assist you with that, the value that you've got, that resource that you've got, has a value. So what are you offering from a business point of view? Now it starts, I've got just a few things, yeah, but really the idea, what is your business idea? Are you very clear about that? Can you communicate it? And I think we did the Business in Chaos session last week, and we were talking a lot about your elevator pitch. I think Tobile mentioned that quite a lot. Um, the sorry, it's Tebogo, not Tobile. Tebogo's mentioned quite a lot about that elevator pitch and making sure that you know what it is that you're communicating. Then again, when you're presenting to someone, what is the team, or who are the team that you have behind you? Is it you as an individual? And what are the skills that they're bringing? So be very clear when you're communicating this, what it is that makes you or your team um, able to deliver on the business idea that you have. Because without understanding the skills of the team, um, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you lack the confidence and the knowledge to communicate clearly what it is that you're offering, and why someone should invest in you and in your idea and your team. Then what is the actual offer? Again, so think about, what are you offering? Are you offering shares? Are you offering a part of the business? Are you offering a product? Or are you offering a loan, so you'll pay back a percentage interest, etc.? So think about what you'd like. Obviously, know the business idea. Think about what it is the business is going to generate and at what point it's going to generate. And so what benefit is there of someone giving you money? So again, if it's a bank, you'll commit to an interest rate, and that's where they make. But you need to make sure that your business is going to be able to generate the income to repay that. So make sure you're quite clear about the offer that you have, and then understand your requirement, right? So really understand what it is that you need. So how much of it is cash? You've got something called a run rate for a business. So if you're working on a particular idea, let's say it's a prototype, and we had Roche last week. He spoke a lot about funding early startups from Silicon Valley, you've got a run rate where or a burn rate where the money that you get in, you need a certain amount every month to keep running for the business, to develop the prototype, to get to a stage where you can present that to someone and then get maybe a second round of funding. What is your burn rate? How long is it going to take? Because when you look at that from your requirements point of view, you can say, look, actually, my business is going to cost 10,000 Rand to get off the ground, but this month I only need 3,000. So what I'm really asking for is an investment of 3,000 a month for the next 3 months or 4 months, right? And that's where you need to understand exactly what it is. So I know that's not directly funding related, but it's really for you to understand the ins and outs of the business. And when you're considering all of that, look at your business and what goes into the business. So yeah, you have marketing, operations, sales, your supply chain, the logistics. What are the different elements, and what sort of input or financial input in particular do they need? What are the skills and experience you can draw on and the resources you can get? So from a marketing point of view, marketing can absorb a huge amount of your budget, particularly if you're launching a business and trying to get somewhere in a hurry. You can reduce your cost of marketing, particularly up front when you're doing prototyping, by doing a lot of awareness raising, getting your stakeholders to work with you and actually get them bought into the idea. Because if they feel a part of it, again, they will share it. But ultimately, you need to have some money in your allocation for budget. If you don't, and you're approaching a business for funding, an investor or a bank, they will look at that and they'll say, if you're not going to market your product, what is the likelihood that you're going to sell your product? And if you can't sell your product, you're not going to return the money to them. So if you don't have something in your business plan for marketing and for sales, and actually all of these, for operations, for supply chain, logistics, it's the same. You need to make sure that when you develop that your cost model of what it is that you need, you've got all of these things thought out. Because any investor who and whether that's, as I say, a bank or someone giving you their money, they're going to want to look at this, unless you're very fortunate, you've got an uncle with a lot of money and he's just going to borrow it to you or even give it to you. But that's, you if you had that, you probably wouldn't be listening to me today. So there we go. So that's really just to think. Now, if you're a really small micro business and you're really just getting started, then you can go to government agencies. Government agencies, and certainly, yeah, I think if you chat to Godfrey at Metseng, he can help you to better understand what is available. Now, I've literally gone, spent a bit of time, and grabbed some information off the websites of both NIDA, the National Youth Development Agency, and SEDO, the Small Enterprise Development Agency. They have a government mandate to help grow the small business sector, both from a young person's point of view, but also just in general for SEDA. Now they have all different things. So you can see on the NIDA side, yeah, they've got the thresholds, threshold 1,000 to 10,000 Rand. That to help you with your idea generation. It's very much for startups and what's called a survivalist entrepreneur. These are sort of the entrepreneurs who are selling fat cook or fruit and vegetables on the side of the road, and they're making a living, they're surviving, and that's about it. And we'll talk a little bit more about some ways people have tried to address that in a little while. But ultimately, there's money available to help these really small businesses. And I think, working with Godfrey and Metseng, when you look at the benefit of working through and understanding what is available and how to access it, I think there's a huge amount of benefit for starting this. And the thresholds go up. If you're a startup, you're starting your PTY or the cooperatives, if you're growing your business, there's money available. Now, the challenge with obviously NIDA for someone like me and maybe Godfrey, I think Godfrey's a bit younger than I am. But as we get older, we sort of fall out of the category that we can access that funding, and that's really where SEDA comes in. And they really, again, are set up with the same sort of intention, but looking at what they do, they tend to spend a bit more time with training and incubation, they're not that heavy on sort of financial support. I think it seems to be a little bit trickier to get financial support, but that might not necessarily be the case depending on where you are and who you've got managing those centers. Um, so that's government agency. I think it's a good starting point. It is government, so you can expect it to take a little bit of time, and there'll be a lot of paperwork. Government loves paperwork, so there'll be lots and lots of paperwork that need to go through. But if you work through someone like Godfrey, then you know what's there, and he can certainly help you with that. The second one, this is really probably where you'd start. You probably wouldn't start with the government agencies. You start with your family, friends, banks, savings. Generally, businesses are started right at the outset for various reasons. You might have a great idea. You might have lost your job, or you might have worked in a particular sector and you realized, actually, I think I can do a better job than my boss, and why should he take all the profits when I can do that for myself? So depending on where you are, will depends on how you approach this. If you've worked for a while and you've got some savings, you may say, okay, I can set myself up with the savings, and I can work through that. You may go and say, well, I can approach a bank for a loan. I can talk to family and friends. But in this instance, and like with everything else, is ask the question, as I said before, what is the offer? Is it a loan? So whether that's family and friends or the bank, if it's a loan, make sure that that's a proper agreement. A loan agreement costs you nothing. It's on the website. If you go to Google and type in a loan agreement for South Africa, you'll find lots of copies that you can download and use. So if you are doing that with family and friends, get a loan agreement in place so that they know that you're serious, and be serious, because this is your business. And if you're not serious about your business, then no one else is going to be. So be serious and do it professionally from the start. So have those loan agreements in place, or it could be a share agreement, right? So you could say, you've got different options. We talked very briefly about them in the business in chaos last week, but there's stock options. So you could say to someone, look, help me out now. I'm getting my business off the ground. As it grows, you'll have option to buy a percentage at a discount. So if my company in the first year, at the end of the first year, is worth 100,000, that means that each share, if there's 100,000 shares, is worth R1. I'm going to give you, because you loaned in early on, we'll give you your money back, but we'll also give you a 10% discount on reinvesting in the company. So that helps because it gives you a familiar group of investors that you can work with as you grow your company. It helps them because you're adding money back into them, and you're getting something back there. Then crowdfunding. Now I see Godfrey, I'm not sure, but I can see there's we've got a few more people joined and we've got a few people left. I don't know if there's an issue on that side, but that's okay. Crowdfunding. Now this is a very, very interesting one. I think if you look at crowdfunding as a funding method, it's usually used for a little bit more of an established business, where you have a prototype. So it's not your really, really early business startup. It's a business that has a product, or at least a prototype, that they want to get out. But what they want to do is either seek donations. So as an example, on my left is the Libra by Limok. So Limok is an agency run here in South Africa. You may have come across. It runs a marketing agency, worked in technology for a long time, the founder, and he then launched South Africa's first homemade, as in South African made, phones, and it's called it Libra. It is on sale now, so you can find the Libra 5 Pro wherever you look. You can go find it on their website. But ultimately, what he wants to do now is he wants to manufacture it completely in South Africa. And in order to do that, he needs to raise a starting capital of 20 million Rand. So what the company here has done is they've literally reached out to their fans, to the people of South Africa, and said, from as little as 20 Rand, you can help us to manufacture the phone right here in South Africa. Now, if you have a look, I think it's on the BackaBuddy. If you click on the link, and you can find it on their Facebook page. If you click on the link, it'll take you through to um, where you can donate. So the model here from a crowdfunding point of view is really looking and saying, I need to finance a business. I have something which I think will appeal to a group of people, and I want to get it out. So what can I do to raise the funds? Now, for the Libra by Limok, the way that they're doing this is they're saying donate. So help a business to establish in South Africa. It'll be the first South African smartphone manufacturer. I think it's a fantastic story. But what they're asking for here is a donation. On the other side, on the right-hand side here, you've got a platform called Kickstarter, and I'm going to jump to that in a second and just give you a brief tour. And this is where someone has got a prototype. In this case, it's an anthology, which is a group of collection of stories, and they're offering it as a pre-order. So it's two different models here. You've got one which is a donation. So you as an individual, you've helped fund the business, but there's no obligation on that business to return any money back to you. There's no real benefit to you as the individual other than feeling good about it. From your business point of view, if you're going down that route, by getting people to donate through something like the BackaBuddy campaign, you're essentially receiving money to start your business with no strings attached. Obviously, if you're using something like BackaBuddy, there's bank charges, they've got a commission, etc. But once you receive whatever money comes after those payments, that money is yours to do with as you wish from a business point of view. You could run away with it. There are people that have done that. But ultimately, if you're serious about your business, then that wouldn't be the approach you take. So you can take that money and utilize it without having any bank charges, any repayment, etc. So you've got that money to do with as you wish. On the other side, for the pre-order, what you're saying is I've got a prototype and I'm ready to sell it. What I need is I maybe need to raise enough money to get my first run of the book out. So if I can get the first run of my book out, then it'll get into people's hands. I'll get more sales and I can reinvest and do a second run, third run, etc. But to get me off the ground and make this a viable business proposition, I need to be able to order, say, 1,000 copies of the book. And 1,000 copies of the book are going to cost me 10 Rand a copy. So I need 10,000 Rand. Plus there's the fees, etc. for the platform. So I'm probably looking at 12,000 Rand. And that will help me to get the book out. So in order to do that, what I'm doing, obviously my cost is 10 Rand a book. I'm going to sell it to you at 20 Rand a book. And that's going to help me to have money to reinvest. It's going to help me to pay maybe myself a salary as well. And it's going to help me to buy some time, maybe to do a second group or a second collection of books. So Kickstarter as a platform, it's not available in South Africa, but the concept is one that's really is worth exploring. So I'm going to jump very quickly back into here, and I see our Facebook feed didn't go live, so not to worry about that. So this is Kickstarter, and you should see in front of you a little pot turning. It's a really interesting idea. So it's a ceramic pot, and you can see on the screen, if you can't see, it's sort of a full ceramic pot with a bowl at the bottom for plants, and it's serrated, so it's got grooves on the side, and that helps you to plant the seeds, etc. Now you look at that and you think, well, it's a pot plant, right? That's all it is. It's a pot plant. It's unique because it's got some interesting ideas. You pour water in the top and the water leaks through the terracotta and it waters the plant. So it keeps them watered for a long time. It's no mess, no fuss. And you can see, yeah, this, as I say, it is a US platform. And you can see on the right-hand side, if you can see the screen here, it gives us different payment options. So if we're buying the early bird here, it's $59, and that will be delivered anywhere in the world. That saves you $20 on this. So what they're doing is they're trying to entice you. They say our recommended retail price for this is going to be $59, or sorry, $79, but we're selling it to you as an early bird price. You get it for 59. Now, if you sign up for that, you can see, yeah, there's a limited number of them of 8,500. All right, 8,500. Now, they've explained very nicely as you sort of scroll down, you can see the plant, you can see all about it, you can see there's some videos, you can see how you water it, you can see how nicely the water pulls through. It's beautifully done. And this you can only do if you've got a prototype. And that's why I say for crowdfunding, you want to have prototypes that you can demonstrate to people, so that they know that they're more likely to actually get this. It's a well thought through idea. If you've got to this stage where you've got your prototypes in place, you've got videos, people can see that you've done the research, you know what the cost is going to be, and they're a little bit more assured that if they order it or pre-order it, they're going to receive it. But if I take you right back up to the top, where I didn't show you, you've got the little video here. This particular pot plant has got 25,000 people pre-ordered it already. They wanted $20,000, and they have already raised almost $3 million worth of orders. Right, now that is quite phenomenal. It's amazing. They usually go for about they go for about 31 days. So this one might have been a little bit longer, but certainly in the next 28 days, when you look at this, it can double. So they can have 3,000, or sorry, another 25,000 backers that'll give them $6 million worth of orders. Now that is something that can really, really get your business off the ground. So crowdfunding can be phenomenally successful if done correctly. I think from a South African point of view, BackaBuddy is fine, but it's nowhere near as sophisticated as something like this. I think this is certainly something that from a South African point of view, if someone wanted to grab this and run with it, I think would be a phenomenal success if we could really professionalize the way you do crowdfunding and prototyping to this kind of level. I think that would really help. Now that's just something to look at, to try to understand what the market is doing. So those are the options from a crowdfunding point of view. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause there for a moment. I know we've got a few people on there, so let me open up the lines and just see if there's any questions on anything that I've covered so long. So your lines will go unmuted, so you can. I'm doing it from my side, so you don't need to push buttons on your side. But if you do want to stay mute, then that's fine. Any questions on anything so far? Crowdfunding? No questions. Okay, that's fine, guys. It's not a problem. I think it's just worth looking at this. And again, as I said, not just like from the NIDA point of view and the government funding, but I think from prototyping, it's something that Metseng is working on quite a lot, is trying to help small businesses to start the journey and get themselves to a point where the prototyping is in place. Because once you have a prototype, if you get that early funding and you can approach investors with a prototype as well, if you can get a sort of groundswell behind you of interested people, you can take those things to the newspapers, the magazines. It'll go viral, and you can get yourself to a point like that flower pot, which is just a terracotta pot, which sells for 1,000 rand. I think that's quite. It's phenomenal that such a simple concept can take off in such a big way. Now, obviously, our economics is different to the US. Our number of people in the country is different to the US. It's a different model, but think about how that can work. So that's crowdfunding. I think that's important to have a look at. So I'm going to go on to microlending. I'm just having some coffee. Cheers. So I'm going to move on to crowdfunding. And crowdfunding, I think from my side is again a very, very interesting way, especially when we look at the economics of our country and where the majority of our country is economically. I think we know if you watched the news at all last year, you would have seen multiple mentions of the fact that South Africa has the highest rate of difference between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor, the ultra mega rich and the mega poor. So we have a very divided society when it comes to that. And when you add on top of that the chaos we're going through at the moment with the virus and things like that, it really it puts us in a difficult position. So we're looking at different ways that people have addressed those issues. So I want to start with Muhammad Yunus, who's on my left here. So Muhammad Yunus, um, there's a nice quote from him. I'll start with that. He says, "People should wake up in the morning and say, I am not a job seeker. I am a job creator." And this we're going to see more and more and more, particularly as the COVID-19 sort of crisis unravels and we come out of it and people suddenly realize that they've lost their jobs. It was really, really interesting. There was a quote, and I forget who it was, but it was aimed at South Africa, and it said it was at the beginning of lockdown, and someone said something along the lines of, there are probably 1 million people in South Africa who've just lost their jobs and they don't even know it, because the companies will try as much as they can to keep themselves going. But there's another business saying that is quite useful, and it says, "Don't waste a good crisis." And if you look at governments, they are doing this at the moment. They are looking and they are saying, we have something to blame. So we can make deep and lasting cuts to all sorts of things. We can bring financing, we can cut there, we can cut there and bring money together. And businesses are doing the same. And from your own point of view as business owners, it's a fantastic time now to look at it, look at your company and say, actually, I've got a good reason for carving some pieces off or creating mergers or really cutting down, reducing my costs, because it's something that maybe in a sort of more normal economic situation we might do when it gets really, really desperate. We may not really have the time to look at all of our finances all the time. So we end up paying, it's like from your personal point of view, you end up paying for the gym membership for 6 months past you using it. You don't cancel stuff on time. Things auto renew like your insurance. And so what the situation we're in now is they're estimating up to 50% unemployment in South Africa. And that means that half of our workforce will have to be job creators. You're going to have to be creating jobs for yourself. And this is really, really key. So the micro lending element that Muhammad Yunus came up with, he studied, I think, at Harvard or Yale in America. He was originally from Bangladesh. He was from a fairly well-off family, and he went off to America to study, and he studied economics, and he came back to Bangladesh. And I think if you look at Bangladesh, they also have a similar economy to, they certainly did economy to ours, where they had a huge amount of poverty. And he looked at this, and he became a lecturer at a university, and he sent his students out to the rural villages and towns, and he said, go do your experiments, do your research studies on the rural areas, and explain to me as your professor what it is that keeps people in poverty. And so they went out and they came back, and he accompanied a lot of them on their research assignments. They came back and they realized that the issue that they had was not so much a money issue as it was an access to credit issue. So in a more successful economy, an individual will approach a bank and they can get a loan at, let's say, 10 or 15%, if the depends on the interest rate. If you're in somewhere like the UK or the US or Japan, your interest rate could be as low as 3%, 2%, even. But when you're in rural economies, you're dealing with rural economics, you've got issues where, I was listening today, and we'll talk about stokvels in a moment, but where from a stokvel point of view, if you borrow from a stokvel, the interest rate there is 30%. And he discovered, Muhammad Yunus, that a lot of the people that were working on a week by week basis. So they would go to the money lenders, whether that's a Stockfell or whatever, the loan sharks. They would borrow money. They would buy their raw material. They would create the product. They would go sell the product. They would sell the product. The money they got from the product would essentially be enough to buy their food for the week and to repay the loan shark. So they broke even at the end of the week. Then they had to go back to the loan shark to borrow more money to go back in and to carry on. So again, from the point of view, yeah, we're looking at survivalists. They would never break out of that circle of poverty because they they were always just breaking even, and so they could never better themselves. They could never go sort of the step beyond that. So what he did is he created a bank, and you can go do your research. I'm not going to include links and stuff like that, all the details there if you're interested. You can go and have a look. It's called the Grameen Bank of Bangladesh, because he approached banks and he said to a whole group of banks, why can we not lend money to the rural people at a normal standard interest rate of the country? Why do we not lend to them at 10% when they go to the loan sharks and get 30, 40, 50%? And the banks refused to work with him. So he said, well, then I'll do it myself. So he started his own bank, and he started to borrow money to the ladies in particular. He would always do it to ladies. That was his sort of business model when he started out. But he would also do it to groups. So he wouldn't borrow to individuals. Now, the big banks, they essentially said that the problem with lending money to people in rural areas was that they didn't have all their paperwork. They couldn't have proof of income. They didn't have bank accounts to show. And so they would go against all the principles of a traditional bank. So he looked at it and worked with his students to come up a way around it and said, okay, let's work with a group of 5 women, and we'll borrow that money to those 5 women. They're all ultimately accountable to pay it back. So if one doesn't, the others will need to pay it back. And using that methodology, he started his bank, and his repayment was in the region of 98%, whereas a traditional bank repayment on loan is something like 75%. So his bank, working with people in the rural areas who had no credit histories, very little documentation, etc., his bank was more successful than a traditional bank. And through that, he was able to uplift and start micro lending phenomenon. So you can go and have a look at that. He's probably one of the biggest banks, I'd imagine, in Bangladesh now. He got the Nobel Prize for that as well. So it's very, very well regarded. Now, if you move that into a South African context, we have stokvels. Stokvels are very traditional. They're also collectives, and they've been around. I was having listening to some stuff on YouTube this morning on stokvels, just to get myself more acquainted with it, because it's not something I've spent a lot of time or dealt with. But it's a traditional way of saving without a bank that goes back more than 150 years. It was originally started as a method of buying cattle together in communities. Now, the interesting thing with stokvels is, at the moment, and this is in a South African context, stokvels are worth to the economy the equivalent of 50 billion rand a year. And that's 50, and that's billion with a B. Now, if you look at that sort of capital that's floating around in our economy, that's enough for that just that industry to buy a company the size of Woolworths every year, right? Now let that sink in for a moment. There is a collective capital there to start or to buy out directly a company like Woolworths. But when you go deeper and you watch a few of the videos and the interviews and stuff with people in the industry around stokvels, they say part of the problem with stokvels, though, is that a lot of it is not really used for saving for the long term. So a lot of it is used for groceries, or they do savings for Christmas. But the problem is that at Christmas, they'll get the money from the stokvel, and they go down and they buy all of their Christmas alcohol and food, etc. And by the 1st of January, all of that money that's taken them a year to save is gone. Now, when you look at it from a business point of view, though, there are investment stokvels, and this is something I think you should really consider or think about, is how collectively, from a community point of view, can you gather funding and also invest? So it becomes much more than just a savings vehicle. Stokvels who have extra money do lend that money out, but at a higher percentage interest. Obviously, there's different risks, but you need to have a look at that and say, can you get a hold of money in a much more traditional way, a way that perhaps people in your community will understand better, and that helps you to help them? Because if you're part of that, you could collectively, if there's 10 of you, you can collectively each benefit, and every month someone takes that money and use that to start their business, get that business going, invest back. You can have in your community 10 businesses started before Christmas time, and that I think is a fantastic thing to do. And you hold each other accountable. You are a network that works together. So following a little bit of the model from Muhammad Yunus and the Grameen Bank, and tying that in with a really traditional African way of saving, and saying, is there something there that you can use as an entrepreneur to move forward? So let me jump to the next one. I'll be quick. I see I've got 15 minutes left. I'll do 5 more minutes maybe, or 10, and then I'll stop for questions. So I'm moving on now just to thinking about more of your sort of business support and the resources. And again, in the same way as the stokvel, think about how you can bootstrap your business, how you can do it far more cost effectively than anyone else. Because at the end of the day, if you can do it more cost effective than someone else, ultimately that puts you in a better competitive environment, because you can manage your prices. You can, if you maintain your prices, that means your profit margins are higher. If you can cut your costs, again, it increases your profit margin. It also allows you, in times like we currently are, to lower your price. It allows you to go out to your customer base and help them, because they're currently struggling. So you can drop your prices and do them a favor, and you can still make enough money through that to survive. So there's 3 different models I'm going to talk about very quickly: freemium, scalable, and sharing. So that's really thinking about the freemium sort of model, where there's a lot of stuff out there for free. If you sign up, for instance, for Dropbox, which is the file sharing app, you get, I think, 5 gigabytes of free shared data up in the cloud. That means you can use it, you can share it. It's a fantastic way, if you're starting a business with people in different areas, to share data. You can load it, they can see it almost immediately, and it stays there. So you can access it if your phone gets stolen or breaks, etc. Your Dropbox account is stored in a server, probably in Johannesburg or maybe even in the US. So you can just log back into your account and all of your data is there. It really makes sense, and that is free. On the screen in front of you, I was just having a look from a hosting point of view, hosting your own website. If that's something that you do, you've got lots of options here. You've got from free, and this is a company called Machini. Certainly the 2 on the left and the 1 on the right. Yeah, Machini is a hosting company here in the Western Cape. They've got free, where you can develop and spend the time actually working on your website before it goes live and before you have to pay anything. So you can build 3 websites and then decide whether it's worth doing, but it gives you something to play around with. Then you can move to something where you pay. So once you're ready, single site hosting, that gives you your free, or your WordPress, which is just a content management system for websites. It gives that to you, that you can go for 99 Rand a month. That's not terribly expensive, but again, that's one cost. If you look at that, that's just your hosting. On top of that, you may need someone to help build it. There's all sorts of other costs that you want to try, not necessarily avoid. Some of them are unavoidable, but that you want to reduce. So you've got to think about what it is that you need. What is the resource you actually want? If you look at the one here, the bronze email in red, this is essentially and effectively a hosting package. So you get your own domain. So you'd get, for instance, simplylocal.co.za, but you don't want a website. You just want a bit more professionalism in your email addresses. So what this does, you can see for 19 Rand a month, which is virtually nothing, 19 Rand a month, you can get up to 10 email accounts. Right, so you can have a Andrew at Simply Local, you can have a Godfrey at Simply Local, you can have an accounts department, you can essentially with that have a marketing, have accounts, have a whole range of different email addresses that all link back into your one phone. I've got on my computer at the moment probably 30 different email addresses for the two companies we run, for a marketing department, account department, the online store department, etc. So there's a lot of things that you can do for 19 Rand a month. The disk quota here is not very big, so obviously that's something to think about. But if you manage that well, then your cost is so low to do business. Now, the other thing then, the bulk plan here for 7.99 on the right is saying there's 10 WordPress sites. So again, when you're looking at forming collective or working with people, can you work together to bring everyone's price down? So 7.99 is for 10 WordPress sites, or 99 Rand for one. You're saving 20 Rand each per month. If you're going to have more sites, if someone wants 2 or 3 sites, then you're reducing your costs. And it may not sound like a whole lot, but every little bit helps when you're getting your business off the ground. So that's just things to think about. Now, the thing when you look at these things like the AfriHost, the bronze email here, the AfriHost, it's very scalable. You can go in and it takes you about 5 seconds to up that from 19 Rand a month to 29 Rand a month, and to get more disk space if that's what you need. But you can start with very, very little, yeah, if you're resourceful. Now, I want to show you very quickly something just to bring it all into context here. And I'm just calling it a connected ecosystem. And this is Simply Local. So this is our business that we run. And what we've done is we've essentially spent the time on the left-hand side with the technology. We've put all the technology together. We work with the marketing, and then we build connections. So you've got Metseng there. It's one of our connection that we work with. That helps us, that technology on the one side helps us to connect people on the other side. So we've got makers who hand make products and they come on board. We've got manufacturers who manufacture all sorts of things and they come on board. And then we're working now with the connections with Metseng on startups. So helping businesses to access the technology that we've spent the time developing, putting in. So actually what happens is the technology that Simply Local has put together becomes a shared resource. Right? It's something that we can all tap into and utilize at a fraction of the cost of actually setting up your own store. And so that's the model that we use, because we think it works. And in between all of that, if you look up at the top, is training. So trying to connect people with the information, the data that they need is really, really important. So you've got all of these different models and all these different things. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on that, but that's just me wrapping up and saying that there's so much out there. There's funding, different ways of funding your business, number one. And number two, there's different ways of being resourceful. You can connect with people. I think that's really crucial. Different people have different skills, and particularly when you're going to be talking and setting up your business, you want to be able to stand in front of investors and talk about your team. If it's all about you, it becomes a problem. It's a difficult investment if it's only one person. But if you've got a team with a variety of experience,